Hello and welcome back to the Library of Zur. Sorry our video isn't working, it's been kind of finicky with us, but here we are, we're getting ready to start part 2 of the Heir to the Empire book review. As usual, with me is my co-host Jared.
Yes, hello everybody. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties, and like we mentioned before, it's been a while now, sorry about that, but life and 2020's been doing weird things to everybody, so what we're trying to do is chop these up into a little bit smaller pieces, so hopefully it's a better listen or a better watch. Don't have to worry about sitting in front of the TV or with your headphones on for an hour. So without any really extra ado, let's go ahead and jump right into that. Andrew, where did we leave off?
We left off on page 185, if I remember right, which
Yes.
is right at the end of chapter 16, the beginning of chapter 17.
Okay, so again, we have kind of focused on Luke here for a little bit. If you remember from the previous part, basically a brilliant scheme by Thrawn to try to capture him, followed by some equally brilliant piloting, use of the Force, and other basically shenanigans to get himself out of the tractor beam lock and jump away. But we see here picking it up with this new chapter, that kind of leaves him with some problems.
Yeah, Luke's heroics come back to bite him a little bit. His tractor beam escape fried his engines, and now he's left high and dry, so to speak, in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, and we also get to see something nice about some of these Legends old expanded universe books. Even though it's definitely all about our heroes, we get to see everybody's unique skills. In this case, R2. Notice that, of course, like Andrew said, no hyperdrive for Luke. And his subspace radio, it's fixable. However, I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe he mentioned something about pulling all kinds of wires out of the X-Wing, and it would take R2 basically days to do it. So we get to see another unique force power here by Luke, one that I know I wished I've had in real life a few times, the ability to just kind of put yourself in a restful state for basically however long, a few days I think is what he does here in this section. So he's going to be able to save oxygen. With the X-Wing being damaged, his life support will last a lot longer than a regular human's because of that.
Yeah, it's, for lack of a better term, he's kind of inducing a coma into himself and putting his body at a very low consumption rate of energy, air, and other stuff like that.
Right, so then we get sort of you can imagine sort of the music in the Lucas fade out there as Luke goes to sleep and R2 starts to work, hoping he can get the transmitter fixed in time to get Luke some assistance. Then we cut over to another one of our main characters. We cut over to the planet Kashyyyk, actually, and this is something that's very, very interesting. We didn't get to see it on this big screen until Revenge of the Sith, I believe. And also, I have a note here, but I'm going to go ahead and let you talk about it a little bit, and then I'll mention the note if you don't cover it.
Yeah, jumping right back to where you said we shifted points of view, Luke called out to Leia through the Force, and we haven't seen that since Empire Strikes Back. I don't think he called out to her specifically in Return of the Jedi. She sensed him at the end of the movie, but he never really physically called out to her.
Correct.
So it was a nice
sibling bond
type
of situation there, basically.
Right.
And then, go ahead, sorry.
It cuts back over to Leia, who is on Kashyyyk, and like Jared mentioned, this is the first time we can explore the planet Kashyyyk and understand what it looks like from a book standpoint. And this is 14 years before Revenge of the Sith, so it was all the height of the author's imagination of what they wanted it to look like. And I kind of shared that view. I thought Kashyyyk was a very dense, thick, almost suffocating type of jungle with these huge trees that towered over you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how Timothy Zahn wrote Kashyyyk, and I really appreciated that.
Right, and so the note I had kind of ties into what you were talking about. The level of detail that he describes it with is really crazy. And sort of one of the advantages of doing a video list here is I can do a little basically Wikipedia magic right here. One of the notes I put down was, so we've got Heir to the Empire, released in 1991. That's really the first description you get, period, about Chewbacca's home planet, Kashyyyk. So if we were to do a little bit of wiki here, I don't know if you can hear the typing or not, but we've got 1991. The first time we really see it in a big setting, actually, I think was the Knights of the Old Republic game.
Yeah, that's what I wrote down too.
So we've got 2003, and then when did Revenge of the Sith come out? I think it was shortly after that.
Late 2004, maybe 2005, I believe.
Yeah, I'm actually doing that right now. 2005. So yeah, so we get this huge detail. You know, again, one of Zahn's strengths, I think, that kind of gets overlooked. He obviously does characters very well, but really his detail, you know, small details here, talking about Kashyyyk, how the trees, the branches kind of are wrapped together, different details like that. I think those captured that, and you can definitely tell that they took, you know, notes, or at least somebody involved in the creative teams was, you know, reading these pages. And, you know, back then with these books, Lucas had to basically sign off on the basic premise of things. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine somebody on his creative team for Revenge of the Sith didn't think about that book at some point, because it's very similar.
Right.
How lush it is, how thick those trees are. So
Yeah.
it, you know, we've got about 10 pages of describing the, you know, the Wookiee city and some different things about their society. So a really interesting deep dive in there. Did you have any other notes on that part?
I just want what we saw in Revenge of the Sith was just a shoreline. We never really saw
Mm-hmm.
the thickness of Kashyyyk's jungles, like it's described in this book and as it's portrayed in the Knights of the Old Republic. Fortunately, since the last time we recorded, the game Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order has been released, and
Yes.
there is a Kashyyyk is one of the planets you can travel to, and you go into the thick of the jungle, and it's exactly like it was described here and portrayed in Knights of the Old Republic. So even though it looks a little bit different in Revenge of the Sith, that's because it's on the shoreline, it's
Right.
close to a body of water, so it's only natural for the thick, dense jungle to be a little more sparse near that body of water, but it gets very thick the farther inland you go.
Right. And so something that's, you know, just, we could spend a long time. We could probably do a whole episode on just those 10 pages. But we get up here to, I think it's about page 206. Luke is rescued. I'm doing air quotes for that. By the crew of the Wild Card, and we get to see more of Talon Card's powers of deduction, I guess you could say. He's able to determine a lot of things about the situation just from a glance, and I believe just from
Yeah.
talking to Luke. And then these guys, despite being smugglers, they get the drop on him.
Yeah, with Luke being in his trance, he didn't really have his senses aware of what's going on around him, and he was kind of pulled out. If I remember right, I have the book in front of me, but
You're better than me. I don't have it in front of me. I probably should have, but
if I remember right, it was R2 that pulled him out of his trance by frantically beeping, like "There's somebody
yeah,
coming!
I
There's
think
somebody
you're right
coming!"
on that. And then he was basically also, if I remember right, he's kind of a little bit unprepared. I think because of the Isla Mari as well.
Yeah, yeah. The one thing I did write down, I'm just gonna read what I wrote. The
Sure.
pre-ignition sequence Luke initiates at the beginning of Chapter 18 is one of my more enjoyable moments. Since we are right at the beginning of Chapter 18, he
Mm-hmm.
goes through he goes through the starting up of an X-wing from a cold start. Like the engine's
Mm-hmm.
been sitting there cold for a couple days now, so Luke is going through a cold start, and I thought that was one of the great world building things. It brings a tangible feel to an X-wing, like it is a machine. It has to be,
Right.
you need to prime these things. You need to, make sure these things are working. I thought that was something that added believability and plausible science to a something like a outer space starfighter.
Right. Yeah, because you normally get that whole like sci-fi, well, it just works, trust us, it works.
Yeah,
But going through that
yeah,
whole process, definitely an interesting thing for sure. And so then kind of a first of moments here. We've talked about the characters, built up stuff, but we get the first face-to-face meeting between Luke and Mara Jade, and definitely not really any sort of like respect or chemistry or really anything. Just matter of fact, exact opposite. Blazing hatred is the word I wrote down that Mara has for him.
yeah. I mean, if looks could kill, Luke would be dead at this point.
Which is
Mara
also
Jade
some
has,
building for her because as she makes other appearances throughout novels and the legends in the old EU, there's that's almost as famous a trait about her as her force abilities, piloting skills, whatever, is just that whole if looks could kill, don't make her mad or get on her bad side, and we get to see that right away.
yeah, yeah. She her. Let me back up.
Mm-hmm.
She is fully capable of backing up those withering looks with
Right.
action. She's not somebody who just puts on a show with a mean face. She is through and through a very capable and versatile fighter.
Very
And
true.
I wrote down here that as soon as Luke is aboard the wild card, he senses something is amiss, as if they expected him to find him there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because of that kind of hunch he had, he kind of deduced that Mara Jade might be force sensitive.
Right.
And like you said, that blazing hatred through the force, she is a furnace of hatred for Luke right now.
Right. And so then after that whole situation, we get to, looks like I have it as page 219. Card, who likes to keep all of his options open, as we mentioned before, he actually tells Luke, hey, the bounty on you by the Imperials, and gives, details. Um, Again, just kind of having that be out there. He always wants everybody, whether it's his enemies or even his allies or even somebody he's not sure about, he kind of makes sure that they know that he has, more than one hand to be able to play if he needs to. Always letting people know, I can make something out of any situation. And so telling Luke about the bounty, I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and he keeps Luke neutralized. He has Ysalamari scattered out all around him, so Luke is essentially powerless to do anything to Talon, even if he wanted to. He's the equivalent of just a normal person at this point, and he's a normal person at a disadvantage because he's been stripped of his weapons and everything. So Talon has the definite upper hand, and he's really pushing that advantage on Luke right now.
Right. So go ahead. So you did that. We talked about the more exposition was given there on the East Lamari and their force canceling bubble effect. I'm going to grab the book because this is getting to where having the pages would kind of be helpful. So do you want to sort of talk about that a little bit if you have any other notes on that right now?
On the Ysalamari?
Yeah, and the bubble effect created. If not, that's fine. But
I think we touched on it a little bit because Thrawn wanted to have a supply of them in case he encounters force-sensitive people, much like Juru Sabayoth. But for those who didn't listen to episode 1 or don't remember, the Ysalamari are a creature that create a force-negative bubble. So um, when a person who is force sensitive looks in the force and sees things through the force, it's kind of like a black bubble or a hazy something that they can't define because the bubble that the Ysalamari exude around themselves negates all force abilities. And when the enough Ysalamari are around, the bubble intensifies and gets bigger. So
right,
one Ysalamari has a 2 meter square bubble of force negating effect.
Mm-hmm.
Isamari is 4 times the effect.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so that's great. That gives us some details, and that also let me grab my copy of the book. So we're going to get into some interesting stuff here. So then after that, they explain it a little bit, and of course Luke, being who he is, despite being locked away, not going to panic, basically taking a deep breath, reciting the Jedi code, maybe doing some meditation.
Yeah.
Like it says there, the last sentence of chapter 19, or last couple sentences, somehow he knew there had to be a way out of this prison. All he had to do was stay alive long enough to find it. So, again, really, even just a maturing of the Luke, even from Return of the Jedi, like starting to see, you know, he's not going to panic. He's not going to let, his emotions get in the way. So we're seeing him really start to turn into that Jedi that we're going to get for the rest of this expanded universe series.
Right, and I think it's a great callback to his core character traits. He in A New Hope, he was the eternal optimist.
Mm-hmm.
When he found Princess Leia was stuck up somewhere, he was like, "Oh, let's go get her. We can do this. We can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I can." And even in Empire, he felt confident enough and optimistic enough to turn Darth Vader, much to his defeat.
Yeah.
And Return of the Jedi, that even though he lost his hand, he didn't lose that optimism, and he's eventually won in turning Darth Vader back to the light. He won in
Right.
defeating the Empire. And now here we are in his further adventures, and that optimism hasn't really wavered. And I think that's something that the galaxy needs, especially in a time of uncertainty where the Empire, the remnants of the Empire are scattered about, and people aren't entirely sure who's going to have
Right.
Control and power. He's that optimistic beacon of hope.
And there aren't really any other Jedi yet either. So, there's no academy. There's just a few different Force-sensitive people he's encountered, but that's pretty much it. So, yeah, good to see him, going into this despite that, difficult situation.
Right.
So then we get to chapter 20, and again, if anybody forgot or didn't see chapter 1, we've got Han and Lando trying to basically create these fake communications from Leia to different officials and different systems, giving a fake flight plan to try to throw off the Imperials and Thrawn. And they decide to abandon it, mostly because things on Coruscant are getting really bad, especially the political situation.
Yeah. This was some of my favorite moments. I've read the book several times, so I can only imagine how I would make it sound in my head. But listening to the audio version, which is what I did for this review, the narrator who had to affect a Leia-like voice with a robotic undertone because
Yes.
of C-3PO doing it, I found really amusing. And you can just imagine how fussy C-3PO is to have this voice. He probably felt so demeaned and so low of himself, but he was doing such a great favor to keep all her enemies off her trail. I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
But like Jared said, they had to get back to Coruscant because Admiral Akbar is under growing pressure from Borsk Phalia, and we mentioned him in the beginning on the previous episode. Borsk Phalia isn't an outright villain, but he is a nuisance, to say the least.
Only out for himself, really. So then you see sort of all the issues, things that maybe people had wondered about, because I don't know if you're like me, I'll definitely, go with the story, whatever it might be, Star Wars, Marvel, whatever it is. I'll follow the story that they've written through to the end, but I'm also thinking about the other things. So, for example, Return of the Jedi, back before we knew we were going to get other movies and things, I'm like, okay, so, good guys won, so now what?
Yeah.
How's the government going to be set up, even though it's, a fictional place? How's that going to be set up? How are the supply lines going to be for everything? What other, that can't have been all the Imperial ships, so we're getting to see these details, and not all of the quote-unquote good guys are going to have the same ideas. So it's like you said, he's not necessarily a villain, but he definitely has his own agenda, and that's kind of trait that those Bothans have. They kind of like to scheme and try to put themselves and their family in an advantageous spot. So it's causing more tension they don't need right now. So that's why Han and Lando have to cut that trip short.
The further we get into the Legends timeline and the Legends adventures, I'm sure you as a listener will shake your fist at Failure just like we do when we read about him.
Pretty much.
He can be a very cunning political opponent.
Yeah.
And if you don't say your things right, he can back you into a corner verbally and force you to admit things you don't want to admit.
He even has done it to Jedi in other books. Like I know that's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's like his power with his skill with words is just that good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we get to one of my favorite parts of the book. If we're talking about 231 here, Han and Lando are trying to basically, they're trying to get some allies, try to get some help against Thrawn. And so it's a huge section. It's like 10 pages here. But you get to see Han and Lando basically playing the con game to get one of the smugglers out of trouble. I thought that was really cool because you think about it, they started off as scoundrels, obviously. You know, gamblers, thieves, con men. And so it's kind of cool to see, they still didn't lose these skills despite being generals and, quote unquote, more upstanding citizens now. They still got the tricks up their sleeve if they have to.
Oh, yeah. Old habits die hard. I wrote some classic Han and Lando misadventures.
Mm-hmm.
In this chapter, along with the scoundrel type of behavior, we get our very first taste of Sabacc.
Yes.
I'm not even sure if Sabacc was explicitly named as a card game in the original trilogy. We knew that Han won the Falcon from a high stakes game, but I don't think it was explicitly mentioned. So this is it. This is our first taste of how the high stakes card game works, and this is our kind of little glimpse on how Han was able to win the Falcon off of Lando. I thought it was great. I thought it was great tension with Han being kind of stuck with his hands in the cookie jar almost, it seems like.
Right. And then, let me check this really quick. So it's first, and this is one of those kind of tricky areas because there's so many books. If you want a nice multi-layered reference, I'll go ahead and give you one. So obviously they give more detail on this in one of the Disney movies, Solo, Star Wars story. Right. But the very first place that it was mentioned is actually in one of the Lando Calrissian novels, which predate these. But this is before. This was before the Legends timeline was really organized. They made some books in the 70s and 80s because they wanted to have more material. Let me check the release date of this. So 1983. So I believe that was when.
That's Jedi. Jedi was 83.
That was when Return of the Jedi came out. So they wanted to do an expanded universe, but they didn't. It wasn't as organized back then. That's actually the first mention of Sabacc. But then this is the first mention of it in the organized timeline. Also, those novels, Lando Calrissian and The Mind Harp of Sharu, Flame Wind of Ocean, those are actually referenced in the movie. Donald Glover's Lando's doing sort of like a video blog at some point. He's just chilling on the ship, and he mentions those novels. I thought that was a nice touch. But like you said, first major mention of it really in organized expanded universe was right here.
And just like the couple chapters ago with the cold start and the X-Wing that Luke was doing, this just adds more flavor and more believability and more things to do in the Star Wars universe. It's not just all guns and lasers and lightsabers. It kind of adds a more real world feel. Like, hey, people will sit down and play cards and have drinks just like you would here at home.
Right. And they sort of do a what if on this with the Sabacc rules. They reminisce about it a little bit. So I thought it was neat to get it to see it on screen. Whatever anybody's thoughts about the Solo movie are, I personally enjoyed most everything in it, but again, nice to see it on screen. And so Then after they do this sort of trickery, I think there's a little bit of a bar fight started, probably.
Yeah, it was
Fake accusations of cheating. They planted a card on somebody or something like that. One of the smugglers did, and so
exactly.
feeds into
It
that
was
whole
a
Western feel that Star Wars has sometimes.
yeah, like chairs are going to get knocked over and people are going to get thrown out the window.
Right.
It felt the tension was at an all-time high because now Han and Lando are at this complete disadvantage and they cannot prove that what happened actually didn't happen.
Right.
So and it all turns out that it was just a test from Lando's contact to ensure they were actually who they were. It was kind of a sick joke almost, but it was the only way they could be sure of who was who at that point.
And that actually gets Han his meeting that he wanted with Talon Card anyway. So,
right.
Probably, Han probably would have loved to avoid it if he could have, but, he gets what he wants, and so he's getting this meeting with Card. And then we kind of jump over to Card's point of view again as he's getting ready for them, for Lando and Han to arrive, and I don't know if you have any notes on it, but I'm going to go ahead. I just had a quick one here. The interesting thing about him, he always has a personal code of honor that he follows, which is kind of unusual for smugglers. You're used to them being like Han or Lando, where, they'll switch sides on you in an instant if it'll give them an advantage, or, they're not afraid to backstab people. But Card actually isn't like that. And it's even more surprising because of how rich and how well connected he is. He still sticks to those principles. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was writing more on a story point. I didn't really write much on Talon's character traits. At the end of chapter 20, I wrote that the final moves are being made to put everyone together for the climax because Han gets this meeting with Talon Card. Luke is with Talon. Leia is being hidden because of assassins right now.
Right.
But everyone is being pushed together for the big event, which is the finale of the book.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We were going to keep this video track short, but as usual, once we started talking about the book, we ran long, almost an hour. So we're splitting this up into two parts. Stay tuned for the second one coming soon. In the meantime, please let us know what you think. You can use the comment section on YouTube. Follow us on our Instagram page, Library of Zur, library.of.zur. You can also support us on Patreon, searching for Library of Zur. And as always, please keep the comments civil and the discussion nice and friendly, and we'll catch you next time.